Welcome to my NiGHTS tutorial. I want to bring to your attention a couple of advanced tricks you can do when building your NiGHTS tracks. The first trick is this. So up to now, when we've placed subsequent circles on our tracks, we've always placed them perpendicular, straight or perpendicular to each other on right angles. And we've arranged their axis transfers like so. You can draw a straight line between your circle points and your axis transfers. Just copy one over there. But they don't necessarily have to be right angles. It's just the easier way to do it because it's easier to manage. What you can do is you can drag your circle anywhere you want on the track, and as long as the circles are touching as close to the edge as possible, you can position them anywhere. It doesn't have to be at the right angle. All you have to do is just zoom in as much as you can. Make sure the circles are touching, and then just move your axis point. I'm shift dragging here. When I'm dragging while holding the shift key, I'm not snapping to the grid. You can just place your axis points wherever the two circles intersect, like so. And so that is one way you can place circles. It doesn't have to be at right angles. It can be along any part of the circle that you like. So that's trick number one. Trick number two is this. So this is a rule that you have to follow when you construct a NiGHTS track, is that most reliably, a player should only be allowed to travel up to a half circle from where they entered. So in this case, since we're transforming from the idiodrone, we want to if we want to transfer to another circle, the last place we can do it is at this half circle point from where we entered. So we put an axis transfer there. If the player is allowed to extend beyond the halfway point of the circle, things can get unpredictable. Sometimes the player will just be able to orbit. Other times the player may freeze at a certain point across from a previous axis transfer. It's a little hard to explain, but basically, if you follow the rule, a player should only be able to travel a half circle. Things should just work. So for instance, I'll show you another example of a halfway point. Let's say, let's do our little trick again where we're dragging our circle anywhere we want. Make sure the circles are touching. If we put our entrance axis point, axis transfer here, where the circles intersect, the player will go from here to here, and so the halfway point for this circle would be somewhere around there-ish. Let's just say it's over there. And so the halfway point is relative to where the player entered the circle. So that's one rule you should keep in mind. Now, you might ask the question, well, in certain parts of the track, you're able to circle multiple times throughout one circle. You're able to orbit multiple times. If you can only allow the player to travel a half circle, how do you do that? Well, what you do there is you overlap. Now, what if you only wanted one circle to orbit around? Let's say that you have a boss arena and you don't want to transfer onto any other circles. You just want to orbit around the one. Is it possible to just have the one axis and just orbit around that forever? Well, that's what we have here. We just have one axis point, no transfers. See how that works. Transform into NiGHTS. Oh, and let's see here. Mayor does not form a complete circuit. So the game will not allow you to use a track that has just one axis. You need at least two circles to form a complete circuit. And furthermore, you need to address these circles at halfway turns. So we just overlap two circles. Make sure our orders are right. Now again, they can be the same radius direction. They can both be counterclockwise. Just make this a different order. And let's set up a couple transfers here. So have an axis transfer with an order going to 2. So that's going to the second circle that we placed. And then we'll place a last axis transfer going to 3. So we don't have a circle 3. So what this means is we'll just jump back to the first circle. and see if that works any better. We'll just turn around and turn around again, and we go backwards this time. And there you have it. For another example, let's say you want your player to orbit around one circle in the middle of it. Let's just say we want to make the player orbit 3 times. So let's say let's say that we want to put our axis points, our axis transfers here at the quarter point from where the player entered. It's a good practice not to overlap your idiot drones, not to overlap anything important with an axis transfer. It's a good idea to make sure your player can't get hurt around an axis transfer, because that can break the track. So I'm just placing this transfer at the quarter point from where the player enters the circle. So we have to count. How many half turns does it take to orbit 3 times? So we're using this transfer to circle 2, and what we're going to do is we're going to create a copy, an axis circle order 2 with the same radius, the same direction. We're going counterclockwise here, and just overlap. And we'll just overlap a few of those circles as we do half turns. So we'll put a half turn over there. We'll order this axis transfer number 3 and put a circle 3 over here. We'll do another half turn. We'll do another axis transfer, set it to order number 4, and then place another circle here for the order number 4. Get the idea. Basically, we just overlapped circles and transfer points several times, and that's it. Let's just create one more axis point, axis transfer point, order that number 7. We're going to transfer to the next axis over here. It'll be order number 7, and I believe we are going clockwise now, so we have our radius direction set with that special value there. Whereas all of these circles are going counterclockwise at 512 radius. And let's just see how that works. So what we just created was a series of overlapping circles so we can orbit multiple times on the stage. So we'll just save that and play. Transform into knights. All right, let's start tracing. We are making 1 revolution, 2 revolutions, and we just transferred over. We almost made 3 revolutions. So, but you get the idea, is that the way this works is to orbit multiple times around a circle, what you have to do is overlap the circle. So the last thing I want to cover is certain patterns you can do with certain overlapping circles. So say, for instance, that you want your player to start on or maybe perhaps a rather tight curve. Let's make this a little tighter, like 320. Let's say we want to start the player on a rather tight curve, but maybe we want the curve to be broader. It is possible. We can certainly do that by creating an axis that overlaps in a certain way. But we're going to make that radius 640. So now what we just did was we're overlapping a circle with the same orientation. So they're both going counterclockwise. It's a little bigger, but now we're just making the curve a little broader. So what that's going to look like is we set our order to number 2, because that's circle number 2. We put a transfer point here saying we want to jump to circle 2. Let's say maybe we want to place one more. I want to place one more circle here. The circle will be order number 3. It'll be a little bigger, maybe twice the size, 1280. And now what we just did is we created an even broader curve that we're going to create an axis transfer, jumping to circle number 3. And so what will happen is that we got a tighter curve going to a medium curve to a broad curve. Let's see how that works. Now we'll transform and we'll trace along. We're on our sharp curve, now we're in our broader curve, and now we're in our broadest curve. Let me just drag this over. Now we're kind of over here. So that worked out pretty well. We'll just backtrack. So you'll see that we kind of broke the track a little bit. It's kind of hard to tell how or why, but one tool you can use to figure out your track placements is to get into dev mode. And we're going to use a special mode called DEVMODE 32. Type that into the console. What will happen is that you'll have these rail rings that'll tell you where the transfer points are. And what we're going to do is we're going to also set God mode, because otherwise these rail rings will hurt us. So we want to know why these transfers are not working well. That's a very good question. We're kind of transferring between circle 2, circle 3. And it's a very good question as to why it doesn't work that well. But let's say that maybe the solution is just to add another circle here. So we'll just add an axis, make it a 512 radius, order number 4. Just sort of shift drag that, make sure they're touching, and also create a transfer that's going to circle number 4. Just so we have an escape. So let's test that, see if that works. Just transform into knights and set our DEVMODE 32 God mode and object place so our timer doesn't run out. We're on our tight curve, now we're on our medium curve, now we're on our broad curve. Got to set the direction here. 16,896. Now we're on our broad curve, and now we're on our escape circle. So you'll just see an effect of what happened when there's no transfer point that we placed at the halfway point. We kind of just snapped back to this, I don't even know where we are, but I think we're on the broad curve again. But it looks like that our little arrangement is working. So perhaps the issue was just that we just didn't have an escape point. So this is a little demonstration of just what can happen when as you create your tracks. Sometimes the tracks will just break, and the reasons can be you didn't place the transfer at the halfway point, or maybe you just didn't build out the track enough. It can be any number of reasons, but if you overcome these, if you get used to these as you build Knights levels, you can create some really interesting arrangements, really interesting layouts. I would really encourage you to look at the special stages, see how they design those, because they do some pretty interesting stuff with the layouts. And so I just wanted to show you some of the more advanced stuff you can do, and hope that inspires you to create more.